Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking a scalpel to one of the most foundational concepts in animal behavior and neuroscience.
We really are.
We're zooming in on the zebra finch, a bird that for decades has been the absolute bedrock of how we understand, well, how we think humans develop speech.
And if you've ever opened a textbook on animal vocal learning, you know the traditional story.
Yeah.
It's a story of pure mechanical imitation.
Exactly. The long-held view says the juvenile male finch is essentially a tiny tape recorder.
hmm
He listens to his father's complex song, he memorizes this perfect template, and then he just spends weeks practicing to match his own little squeaks and squawks to that acoustic blueprint.
It's all sensor-motor integration happening inside the bird's head.
But our mission today, diving into a fascinating 2019 study by Caruso, Peck, and Goldstein, is to ask if that traditional textbook view is dramatically incomplete.
We are asking if a non-vocal social cue, and this is the key, a silent video of a female bird, can fundamentally change that whole learning process.
So, can a little bit of external, non-auditory social reinforcement be the deciding factor between a successful song and a failed one?
What's truly remarkable here, for you to consider as we go forward, is that contingent social feedback, the kind where a parent responds specifically to an immature vocal attempt, is the main driver for human speech development.
Right, with babies babbling.
Exactly. But this mechanism, what we call socially guided vocal learning, was considered almost impossible, or at least very rare, in most non-human animals, especially non-parasitic songbirds like our zebra finch.
So finding it here, it changes everything about how we use this model system.
It really does.
Okay, let's unpack the high-stakes nature of this. Let's look at that traditional model it's trying to overturn. What does that classic pure imitation model, the sparrow model, what does that actually look like?
Well, the sparrow model is pretty straightforward. The bird memorizes the tutor song. That's the sensory phase.
Just listening.
Just listening. And then it starts the sensoromotor phase, where it practices to match its own output to that internal template. It's an internal self-correction mechanism based on sound alone.
So if it sings a note that doesn't match the template, the brain flags an error and the bird just tries again.
Precisely. And sparrows, crucially, they seem to ignore external social cues when they're building their songs. They might use social context to decide which song to sing, maybe, but not how to build the song itself.
The learning is all internally driven.
Which is where the human parallel always seemed to, break down. Until now.
Right, because human infants use those contingent parental responses, a smile, a coo, that focused attention, specifically directed at their immature babbling sounds.
And that guides which sounds they keep and which they discard. It refines their phonological patterns. Without that contingent social feedback, learning just stalls.
So on one side, you have the human infant who's so reliant on a social teacher, and on the other, the sparrow, this sort of independent auditory learner.
But you mentioned it. There was always that one weird bird exception that hinted at something more complex.
The brown-headed cowbird.
That's the one. They're brood parasites, which means they're raised by foster parents. They never hear their own species' adult song. So the juvenile male cowbirds have to learn what a good song even is through social trial and error with females.
And the female cowbirds, they don't sing, so how are they teaching?
They provide a purely non-vocal visual cue. It's a rapid lateral wing movement called a wing stroke, and they do it selectively for the better, more mature song elements the male produces.
So that was the only known case of this socially guided learning.
Yes, and scientists mostly just dismissed it. They figured it was an evolutionary quirk, something necessary only for a parasite that doesn't have a traditional tutor.
But if the zebra finch, our main non-parasitic model for human speech, uses that same social mechanism, that's a paradigm shift.
Absolutely. It would mean that socially guided vocal learning isn't an exception. It might actually be the rule across gregarious vocal learners.
Okay, so to test this high-stakes hypothesis, the researchers designed this really elegant experiment using the best control nature can offer, genetic siblings.
That's right, 9 pairs of genetic brothers, which is great because it eliminates variability from genetics or, their early home life.
And the timeline is important here. The birds were raised by their parents, including the father, the tutor, until 35 days post-hatch.
Which is the exact moment they switch from just listening to actively practicing song.
Yeah.
It's the start of that sensori-motor phase.
From day 35 to day 60, they were isolated in these sound-attenuated chambers. That's the critical practice window.
And then their final crystallized songs, the equivalent of, say, adult speech, were recorded at 90 days.
Now, for the genius of the feedback mechanism, they needed a social cue that was relevant to the finch but purely visual. It had to be silent to rule out any subtle auditory component.
So they used a video playback of an adult female finch performing a fluff-up.
A fluff up.
Yeah, a fluff-up is when the female erects her body feathers and gives a quick little shake. And critically, this is a behavior females typically show when they hear a complex, attractive male song. So for the juvenile, it's a recognized, positive, visual reward.
Okay, so here's where the high-stakes contingency test comes in. They split the brothers into two groups.
The first group was the contingent condition, or CC birds. An experimenter was listening in real time. So when the juvenile male sang an immature or partial or even a sloppy song motif,
The experimenter immediately triggered that 3-second female fluff-up video. The reward was tied directly to the action.
right, on average, about 60% of the CC songs got that instant social reward. It was a direct loop. Sing, get rewarded, reinforce that motor output.
But the control group, this is why this study is so powerful, the yoked control or YC brother.
That bird was paired with his CC sibling, and he received the identical video playback at the exact same time as his brother.
So if the CC bird sang at 10:05 a.m. and got a fluff-up, the YC bird, who might be just sitting there doing nothing, got a fluff-up video at 10:05 a.m. too.
He got the same amount of social stimulation, but it was completely random. It was totally decoupled from his own singing effort.
It's the perfect control. Both groups saw the exact same visual stimulus. They both sang at similar rates. So the CC group wasn't just practicing more. The only difference was the contingency, the timing.
It all came down to timing.
And you can really make the human analogy crystal clear for yourself here. Think of two babies learning to babble. The first baby, the CC baby, says mama, and the parent smiles and coos immediately.
Instant reinforcement.
The second baby, the YC baby, gets cooed at randomly, maybe when they're looking at a toy or just sleeping. Both babies get social interaction, but only the first one learns which sound leads to the social reward.
So the core question was, does that contingent timing alone override shared genetics and a shared early experience?
And the answer was a resounding yes. The difference in learning accuracy measured in the crystallized song at 90 days was absolutely massive.
The contingent condition birds developed significantly better, much more accurate songs. The key metric they used was acoustic percent similarity to the tutor's song.
And if you look at the raw data, the CC birds achieved a mean similarity of 65.2% to their father's song. I mean, they were singing recognizable high-quality copies.
But their yoked control brothers, who got the exact same visual input, just non-contingently, they averaged a dismal 34.8% similarity.
That's nearly double the learning accuracy, just from a 3-second silent video delivered at the right time.
And to stress the importance of that sibling comparison, 8 out of the 9 CC subjects outperformed their own YC genetic brother. Genes and early experience were just overridden by the power of social timing.
To put that 34% in context for you,
Okay.
what does that even sound like?
It sounds, acoustically, like a highly garbled, noisy, disorganized attempt. They were fundamentally failed learning outcomes. The 65% songs, on the other hand, were refined, complex, and socially potent copies of the tutor.
And the researchers dove deeper than just the raw matching percentage. They looked at the quality and structure of the sound itself using a technique called principal component analysis, or PCA.
And PCA, to just boil it down, is a way to take a lot of complex measurements like pitch, tempo, volume changes, and distill them into a few main components that explain the biggest differences between the groups.
And what did it reveal?
It showed a significant difference along the second principal component, which was heavily influenced by amplitude modulation, pitch, and most importantly, entropy.
Entropy being the measure of randomness or disorganization in the signal.
Exactly. The YC birds, because they lacked that social guide, had songs with a significantly broader distribution of entropy. Their song structure was all over the place.
But the CC birds, because they were being reinforced every time they hit a successful note or structure, they rapidly reduced their entropy.
Right, they developed a highly refined, organized song that perfectly matched the tutor structure.
It's like the contingent fluff-up served as a massive filter, instantly weeding out the noisy random attempts and locking in the structured, correct ones.
And the study also noted that within that contingent group, the birds who showed the most behavioral response to the playback, fluffing up their own feathers or wiping their beaks, which are signs of arousal.
They're engaged.
They're engaged. And those were the ones who achieved the highest final song similarity. The social salience of the feedback reinforced the motivation to learn.
This finding isn't just an interesting footnote, is it? It demonstrates a fundamental, previously unknown, non-imitative mechanism at work in our key animal model.
We now have to acknowledge that learning isn't just a mechanical comparison against a template. It's a social negotiation.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture,
This is the definitive, first ever experimental demonstration of socially guided vocal learning in a non-parasitic songbird. It bridges that gap that always separated the human model from the avian model.
so if the song is already memorized during that sensory phase, what is this contingent visual cue actually doing in the sensor-motor phase?
Well, the hypothesis is that it's a potent form of extrinsic reward that reinforces the motor output and strengthens the memorized representation.
Okay.
The social cue basically says, that element you just produced, that's the right one. Commit that modal pattern to memory. It sort of facilitates the crystallization process, acting as a motivational shortcut.
This mechanism also makes us completely rethink some older experiments. You mentioned those studies where finches could learn a taped song if they triggered it themselves with a key press,
Was.
but not if they heard it passively. That was always baffling.
It was. Scientists used to argue that the physical act of the key press was the magic ingredient. This study suggests that the contingency of the stimulus, the bird's action being immediately followed by a result, the sound, that served as an artificial proxy for the intrinsic reward of contingent social feedback.
So the bird felt agency, and that agency provided the necessary internal reinforcement to learn, even without a real bird there. That's a massive reinterpretation of historical data.
It really is. The mystery wasn't the mechanics of the key press, it was the psychology of the reward.
This all raises an important question then. How does a fluffy video translate into a massive improvement in song quality in the brain? What happens on the neurobiological level when this social feedback is delivered?
We have to connect the visual system to the motor learning system.
Right.
And the findings point immediately to the integration of the social motivation system and the vocal learning system. These are not isolated. We know that producing song in a social context is inherently rewarding, which elevates dopamine levels in the striatum.
The striatum being that critical hub in the brain's reward and motor control pathway.
Exactly. When a songbird performs error correction in real time, it's driven by a powerful dopaminergic pathway. This pathway runs from the ventral tegmental area, the VTA, which is essentially the brain's main dopamine engine, directly to a key part of the song system known as Area X.
Which acts as the rehearsal space and refinement hub for new song elements?
You've got it.
Yeah.
So when the CC finch sings an acceptable motif and the female gives a pluck up, that highly salient visual reward triggers the VTA to flood Area X with dopamine.
And that dopamine rush acts as the neurochemical glue.
Yes, it reinforces the specific neural and motor commands that led to that vocalization. It literally says, this motor program is rewarding, prioritize it, and lock it down.
So the contingent visual feedback fits perfectly into this pre-existing social feedback loop.
It leverages the motivational reward of a social partner to drive accurate motor development.
This is a fantastic example of a deep dive that rewrites a textbook. We began with the zebra finch as a purely mechanical imitator, but we conclude that it actively uses these subtle, non-vocal social rewards, just like humans, just like cowbirds, just like marmosets, to guide the structure of its final song.
It doesn't just add complexity, it proves that the zebra finch is an even more powerful and relevant model for studying the development of human social-driven speech.
And viewed through an evolutionary lens, it makes perfect sense.
It absolutely does. Zebra finches are social. They rely on songs solely for attracting mates. So incorporating the explicit non-vocal preferences of the opposite sex directly into their song during development, well, that's the most highly adaptive and effective strategy for ensuring reproductive success. It turns learning into an immediate feedback loop for fitness.
So, since social feedback guides complex vocal learning across such diverse, gregarious species, humans, marmosets, cowbirds, and now zebra finches, here is a provocative thought for you to mull over. What other complex learned behaviors in the animal kingdom, behaviors we currently attribute to purely instinct or simple imitation, might actually be subtly shaped, refined, and organized by contingent, non-obvious social reinforcement?
Think about the complex weaving of a spider or the intricate construction of a beaver dam. Could those behaviors also be guided by subtle social nudges?